It's 11:30. I don't hear anything. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can hear.
Good morning. All right. Well, Ms. Chandra, please go ahead, and if you would please begin with the welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hall, and good morning. And thank you everyone for joining us today for what promises to be an interesting and informative program on disparities in transportation and housing. My apologies. My name is Chandra Rogers, and I proudly serve as the treasurer of the board of directors of the Milwaukee Urban League. And I'm also deeply concerned about the lack of transportation and housing options that prevent many African Americans from pursuing economic independence and creating a fulfilling life for themselves and their families. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed existing gaps in transportation and housing, and it is more urgent than ever that we find realistic long-term solutions. So let's get started. I'm honored to introduce at this time the moderator of today's event, Dr. Eve M. Hall, President and CEO of the Milwaukee Urban League.
Thank you, Chandra, and welcome to everyone. I think all of you know our community roundtables. We are here to inform, to educate, and to engage with you on critical issues concerning our community, both locally and statewide. And I'm excited because today I have some very powerful individuals, and I'm blessed to always have great people on the community roundtable. So today it's Nikki Payne, it's Dave Steele, it's Donna Brown Martin, and they're going to be discussing, as Chandra indicated, the disparities in transportation and housing that especially exist for our communities of color. As always, our MUL Roundtable is sponsored by BMO Harris Bank. They are also a member of our board, so I always give a quick shout out to Patty Cadorn, who has helped to make it possible. Please note that our next roundtable will be Wednesday, January 27th. We know that the holidays are coming up, so that's why we will not be providing the roundtables for the next couple of months. So, access to convenient transportation and safe, affordable housing, they are key factors we all know in achieving economic self-sufficiency. And as an urban league, we focus heavily on employment. And we know that if you don't have transportation to get to your job, if you don't have a stable place to live, those two factors make a difference in and all of itself as to how you can even survive. And we know it blocks the process and the path to quality education, to family supporting jobs, to healthcare resources and recreational activities. So we've invited 3 experts here to discuss how we can reach sustainable, and I say sustainable, solutions that eliminate these disparities that disrupt so many lives in our community. And remember, you can submit your questions and comments via the chat box. When we finish our presentation, we will acknowledge those questions and have a conversation as a community. So let me first introduce our panel today. Nikki Payne, she is the Public Involvement and Outreach Manager for what we call Sewer PAC, which stands for Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. It is the official metropolitan planning organization and regional planning commission for the 7 counties. That would be Kenosha, Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Racine, Walworth, Washington, and Waukesha counties. Next, we have Dave Steele. He is the executive director of the Regional Transit Leadership Council. We can have Dave's picture, please. Dave Steele is the executive director of the Regional Transit Leadership Council, which is a coalition of public and private sector leaders from throughout the southeastern Wisconsin region that unite around shared strategies and actions to address connectivity challenges. and I'm honored to serve on the Regional Transit Leadership Council Board. Dave Steele. Next, we will have Donna Brown Martin. She is the Director and Highway Commissioner for the Milwaukee County Department of Transportation, where she oversees fleet, highway maintenance, the Mitchell Airport, and the Milwaukee County Transit System. So again, powerful panel that we have today. So let's begin with you, Nikki. We are all aware that Milwaukee ranks near the bottom of nearly every measure of quality of life for African Americans. And I would ask, how do we compare with similar cities in the areas of employment, housing, and transportation? And have those cities experienced any success in addressing these racial inequities? Nikki?
I'm so sorry, everyone. I was still on
There
mute.
she is.
What I was going to say is thank you for the question, Dr. Hall. During my presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the plan that we have, which is Vision 2050. And we actually looked at our peer cities and across the country to see how they compare, as you were asking me about that question. As far as transportation within our metro area, we are one of two cities, metro cities, that don't have an electric transit service. So us and Detroit are the two that I'd be talking about. But I would also mention about, as far as no vehicles in the household, we rank within the Midwest. We're number 5 out of the 15, Buffalo being at the top of the list and Nashville at the bottom, as far as the percentage of households with no vehicles. Against our other metro areas, we are number 2 out of 15. So there are definitely some challenges as far as people not having access to transportation to get where they need to be. As far as housing, we are high for the Midwest as far as having multifamily dwelling units that are being purchased, but we are below average for our for the metro cities across the country. So there are still some challenges that are here. And again, I will talk a little bit more about that in the presentation. So jumping right in, and again, I'm going to say thank you again for the honor of sharing what we've learned over these last approximately 6 years. As SewerPAC, we are a governmental agency. As was mentioned, we represent the 7 counties, 150 local governments, 2 million people, and 1.3 million jobs within this area. As being the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we actually have to, next slide, we actually have to do a plan that does land use and transportation options that are available within our area. Our region's long range plan is called Vision 2050. So it's looking out to the year of 2050, making recommendations to our local and state governments. Next slide. The way we did that is we had 9 advisory committees. We had lots of public meetings, talking with people throughout the 7 counties, making sure that we came up with this plan and that it was a very feasible plan. We also worked with community partners, Milwaukee Urban League being one of them, and making sure that we were hitting all groups of minority communities, low income communities, and people with disabilities. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, we have been comparing to our peer regions as we look at the slow population growth. As we know that we have a very aging population that's here in our metropolitan area, which goes, and also there's been slow job growth with significant racial disparities and an unbalanced transportation system. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of how our population has changed within our area, Milwaukee, as you see, is definitely losing as information that was based off of the US Census, both looking at our Midwest region and also against our peer cities across the country. Next slide. So we have a group of people who are 65 or older that is on the rise. We're looking at 44%. Next slide. And then when we look at housing, as I mentioned, the percentage of household changes as far as people that are buying homes has changed only slightly. And as you look at our comparison between the metro area and also within the metro areas of across the country. Next slide. Also giving you just a look that you can see how we compare against our metro cities in the Midwest as far as transportation options. We are the only one that does not have a dedicated source of funding, which is definitely a challenge within our area. Next slide. So the reason that we started looking at the equity analysis is, as we were putting this plan together, we wanted to make sure how realistic it was and what we could do to make our area more attractive. As we've often talked about the brain drain, we want to make sure that there are reasons that people want to come to our 7 counties. And so this plan is hopefully going to reach some of those milestones. Next slide. There were inequities in income and poverty, education, affordable housing, access to transportation, and access to jobs. Next slide. So we're looking at these significant disparities. The first one is looking at poverty. As you look at the families in poverty within our region, 55% versus our 45%, and of those, non-white families are 5 times more likely to be living in poverty. Next slide. What I did was actually wanted to pull a slide kind of looking at the service area of what the Milwaukee Urban League does. So if you're looking at this slide, you're actually looking at the Bayshore area down to Oak Creek, and of course, Milwaukee itself from the lake out. So in that, we're looking at people of color are 4.5 times more likely than whites not to have a high school diploma, and 2 times more likely than whites not to have a bachelor's degree. Next slide. Also mentioning about transportation, as I said earlier when we were talking about the questions, people of color are 4 times more likely not to have access to a car or high quality transit. Next slide. Looking at the significant housing disparities, this is actually giving you a snapshot of what's happened from 1989 to 2018 and the increases that have happened, showing a significant gain as far as renter occupied versus owning a home within this area. Next slide. So just to kind of get a quick, what is affordable housing? That's 30% of your income, which includes your housing, your rent, your mortgage, taxes, insurance, and utilities. We shouldn't be spending any more than that. And we have a huge problem that we are not having enough affordable housing within our area. Next slide. Again, giving you a quick snapshot. I want to make sure that we're staying on time, and I had put in a bunch of information, so I'm apologizing. So I'm trying to go through it a little bit quicker to stay within our time. Next slide. So just giving you an idea of where the housing and job balance is. There's definitely a shortage that you're looking at in the area where you see the green. You see there's no shortage of affordable housing compared to job wages. But as you look around the outlying areas within Milwaukee County, there are some issues for moderate cost housing. Next slide. Which goes into housing and transit connections. As we said, one of the most important things as far as having a job is making sure you're able to get to that job. So having adequate transit is very, very important. Next slide. What I did on this was to kind of give you an idea of looking at just the north side, specifically as far as what transit is available. and looking through our Vision 2050 plan. That will be including the purple line, which I know Ms. Donna Brown-Martin will talk a little bit more about, the possibility of a commuter rail service, and some of our express lines going into also BRT, which will be shared a little bit later also. Next slide. So I thought it was important to show you what accessibility is available for jobs within the 30 minutes of your house. Commuting is always something that takes away from our days, and we want to make sure that you have that access. So giving you an idea as you're looking at how many jobs are available or accessible within 30 minutes of the area that we were looking at from North Shore down to Oak Creek. Next slide. Again, looking at the equity access to these jobs. So as we're looking at how things would be existing as far as with the plan Vision 2050, and also if it was not. So the yellow line is showing you the existing part. The blue is if we were to follow the Vision 2050 plan, which I've referenced earlier. And then there are financial issues that we saw as if we wanted to have the Vision 2050 plan. So have to look at the differences in that. So that's what this particular slide is showing you for minorities, families in poverty, and people with disabilities. Next slide. So from our plan, our recommendations were to focus on urban development and urban cities, increase density, and provide a mix of housing options, so single family homes versus multifamily homes, and preserve a primary environmental corridors and agricultural land. Next slide. For our transit recommendations with Vision 2050 plan, significant improvements and expansions of the public transit system, improved access to suburban employment. When we talk about things like plant that's opening in Oak Creek, how are you going to get to that area? Transit first signs, designs on our urban streets, and just improving the quality of service. Next slide. One of the things that we as SewerPAC helped to initiate with looking at the inequities that were there was the workforce mobility team. We did this in collaboration with the Regional Transit Leadership Council as a way to work with companies to find ways that we can provide service, transit service to their offices or industrial parks. So I would also say, if you get a chance to look at our website, please take a look at what the workforce mobility team might be able to do in helping. Next slide. And finally, just talking about the funding analysis. Anytime we talk about any type of plan, you want to know where the funds are coming and how much we would be looking at. So what you're looking at is actually what kind of difference of the monies that we have and the monies that would be necessary to fund the plan as we actually have it stated. Next slide. So I'm going to say thank you at this point. I'm sorry for running over a little bit, but there was so much information that I wanted to share.
No, that was great, Nikki. I was taking down copious notes. Actually, all of that information, that could almost be just one meeting for all of us, because there's so many implications in what you spoke about. One of the things that really stood out for me, and we can talk more about this, is how there is no dedicated funding. I mean, that stood out to me when we look at the differences in the other cities. That's huge as to whether we will be successful or not. So anyway, we can talk more about that. That was just one of those things that stood out to me as you spoke, along with many, many other things. So thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to Dave. So Dave, when we talk about disparities related to transportation, where do you see the gaps lying, and what is the impact on neighborhoods of color?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you to the Urban League for the invitation. I don't want to repeat, much of what Nikki had covered. But, really the overwhelming issue really is around job sprawl and the fact that as our region has sprawled out, we've just continued to build buildings and jobs further and further away from the city center. And, many, if not most of those jobs are totally inaccessible by transit. So in Waukesha County, only 25% of the jobs currently are accessible by transit. So, we talked about what makes us unique, and Nikki hit the nail right on the head that we have no dedicated funding here. We're one of the few cities our size that is a case. But I would also add that we have really no mechanism for regional cooperation or regionalism in transportation. When we set up our transit systems back in, the 1950s, 1960s, unless you were commuting to a dairy farm, you really had no occasion to go to Waukesha County if you were living in Milwaukee, and vice versa. So we created these systems that are little bubbles in and of themselves. And there's only one bus route currently that crosses from Milwaukee County into Waukesha County, and that's the Gold Line, very highly used, very successful route. But it stops at Brookfield Square. So, just to kind of use an example, the Brookfield Commons, the new retail development out in Brookfield on Blue Mountain Road, you'll see it on I-94 when you're going by. Huge development. It's one of the largest taxpayers in Waukesha County. If you wanted to access a job at that site from the city of Milwaukee, you're looking at a 90-minute to maybe even 2-hour long one-way commute to access that job. And that, I think, is really the heart of the issue. And that's even with transit service, such as it is. So, I did put together my own deck. I don't want to repeat too much of what Nick said, so I'll kind of fly through these. Much of our data that we draw upon in our work at the Regional Transit Leadership Council comes from Sewer Pack. And really what we're looking to do as a nonprofit organization, we're a convener, a regional convener of public and private sector leaders that are working to make real or actualize a lot of the stuff that's in that Vision 2050 plan. So it's incremental wins. We were able to. In working with Milwaukee County and Waukesha County, and Donna can speak to a lot of what Milwaukee County's been doing. But Waukesha and Milwaukee County went in together on a CMAQ grant. CMAQ is a federal grant that supports a lot of the transit projects, to actually have a one fare, one phone app, seamless transition between Milwaukee and Waukesha County Transit. So, that's a baby step, but it's a step in the right direction, because right now we're forcing people to pay two different fares, to take two different systems, to access a job further out. But overall, we know that the majority of transit riders in our region are people of color. We know that the majority are lower income folks. The largest group of transit riders is household income less than 30,000. We also have a transit system that skews young. The majority of people who ride Milwaukee Transit, more than 50%, are under the age of 24. So it's young, striving people. It's people looking for opportunities. It's people accessing their first jobs, their second jobs. It's people accessing, the college, tech school opportunities. So it's a vital link. And, especially in today's coronavirus reality, I always like to remind people that even if you've never been on a bus in your life, you do depend on the transit system in Milwaukee, because when you go to the doctor and you have the CNA taking care of you, taking your blood work, guess how he or she got there? There's a very good chance that they got there with the transit system. When you go to the grocery store, you see the essential workers keeping the store shelves stocked. Many of individuals working in those sectors access those jobs by transit. So even if you haven't been on a bus, you personally, you do benefit from this. And our role as a convener is really to coalesce those local leaders that understand that transit is economic development. It's going to require us to work together. It's going to require us to work across county lines, innovate, and also change some mindsets about what transit is and who it serves. It serves our employees, it serves our customers, it serves our community, it serves our friends, it serves our parents, it serves us. It's for all of us, not for, you know, a subset of us or, you know, only a certain group of economically challenged people. And that's where, you know, we have a lot of growth to do in that area, but truly vibrant cities that are more equitable have transit system and transportation systems that serve more. So, yep. And, you know, I think it's important that, you know, many people who, many people who support and serve us in that space, right? I mean, think about the essential workers. We have this new term now, right? Essential workers. And, you know, the essential workers, you know, very often are getting to work on these on transit routes. We're seeing diminished capacity on the Milwaukee transit system now with a public health emergency. When the economy goes down, transit ridership tends to go up. So I think in the future, you're going to see tremendous, you know, need and demand for good transit to connect people to jobs. So that's, you know, as we position ourselves for an economic recovery that is more equitable for all of us, transportation is absolutely vital.
Okay. So Dave, did you want to go through your slides?
Sure, I could fly through.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of it is things that Nikki had already covered.
But that's okay.
Yeah, it's important for us to remember, we do have a transit system in Milwaukee, and I find it really interesting. I go around the region, I talk to different people, and I often hear Milwaukee does not have a transit system. And I find that an interesting take because we do have a transit system. Pre-COVID, it served about 75,000 people per day. And actually, we have a pretty respectable per capita bus ridership or transit ridership in our region. Far behind Chicago and Minneapolis, but double that of our peers in Columbus, Cincinnati. You can go to the next slide. Now our region's transit systems, like I said, they're very bifurcated, but you have Milwaukee County Transit as by far the largest operator with 30 million rides per year. Next slide. And again, just kind of reiterating, you know, who rides the bus. You know, right now it's, you know, very, very young, mostly lower income folks, majority people of color. And, you know, when you look at the coronavirus impact on transit, and Donna can speak to this much better than I can, but we've seen, you know, huge reductions in transit ridership across the United States. But Milwaukee's seen a little bit less, and I think it's because we do have many, you know, people truly relying on our transit system as their only means of getting around, which then to me makes it even more critical that we invest in these services moving forward. Next slide. And you know, we have a lot of conversation around our community around food insecurity, housing insecurity, all very, very important issues, especially now. You know, with the crisis that we're all living through. But transportation insecurity is an important issue that I think often is overlooked. And Nikki had touched upon the number of individuals in our region that lack cars. This is all pre-COVID data. But we have 19% of households in the city of Milwaukee that do not have access to a car. In 53206, that's, you know, the number is up around 25%. And we have estimated through our work with partnering with workforce development agencies that there are about 30,000 individuals in Milwaukee employable in the labor pool, but lacking a valid driver's license or a reliable car. And again, this is pre-COVID data, so it's you know, surely has only gone up from there. And then the next slide. Yeah, and you know, often overlooked too is the financial burden of car dependency in our region. And this is it requires a bit of a shift in thinking, because I think oftentimes we think that cars equal freedom. And I would never begrudge anybody if that's what they choose to do, to choose, you know, to own a car. You know, please do, of course. I mean, we all should have freedom of choice. But when we remove choices from the table, when we remove bus routes or we remove other ways of getting around, that increases the burden on folks who have no other choice then. Now, if you look at AAA, every year they put out an estimate of how much it costs to own a reliable vehicle. And in 2019, it was $7,500 per year. And that certainly reflects my own experience of, owning cars over the years. If you figure that the median household income in the city of Milwaukee is $35,000 a year, we all should be spending about 20% of our income on transportation, 30% on housing, as Nikki had said. The math just doesn't add up. So there's a lot that we can do to alleviate the housing cost that we need to do. There's a lot that we need to do to alleviate the cost of childcare, which is another tremendous barrier. But there are, there's been a long running program, to alleviate the cost of transportation, and that's the bus system that's been there, from the beginning. And in many ways, it's kind of the unsung community development engine. Next slide. And I think that should be it. Yeah, and then again, job sprawl, spatial mismatch. The majority of jobs now further and further out from the city center, inaccessible by transit. And that's a trend that we've just seen continue as we've just continued to develop more on the suburban fringe. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. And Dave is always so passionate about this issue. I just appreciate just how in touch you are with what is occurring on the ground and knowing who this impacts. I think the piece around the 25% of households in 53206, the other thing just about how the math does not add up when we talk about the real cost that people are paying for housing, or what they would have to pay for cars, and what the actual median income is. And then you couple that with childcare, it makes for a very challenging situation. And then again, with so many of the jobs, as you pointed out, are in surrounding counties. So, again, thank you for all the work that you continue to do in this area. Okay. All right. So now, Donna Brown Martin, last but not least. So what are some of the ways in which Milwaukee County is now addressing these transportation challenges in our area that we've been talking about? Can you give us an update on the Department of Transportation projects that can actually improve transportation access for African Americans and others that are relying on public transportation?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Hall, for the honor of presenting today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to start out by just talking a little bit about what Milwaukee County is doing from the standpoint of our mission and vision and values. As you know, Milwaukee County has set a goal of achieving racial equity in Milwaukee to be the healthiest county in the state. And part of that links to the 3 pillars of our vision, which is our values: inclusion. We actively seek diverse perspectives when making decisions. Influence. We collectively use our power to positively impact our community. And integrity. We do the right thing even when no one is looking. Those 3 pillars are extremely important to us. From a county standpoint, and specifically for me, from a programming and policy standpoint for transportation. If we're going to have equitable transportation options for everyone in the county, whether or not it's highways, access to new roads, local and the interstate, bus service, the airport, we need to collectively work with everyone. And also make sure that people have timely access to services in transit. One of the things that we have is we have 4 services that are going to start over the course of the next 2 years. one, and we'll start it with this one, the East-West Bus Rapid Transit Corridor. Pretty excited about this. It's a 9-mile regional modern bus rapid transit service. It connects downtown to the near west side, Marquette University, Wauwatosa, and the Medical Regional Center. Extremely important. It provides connections to our existing transit services so that everyone can link and have access to this new service. And it provides a real access point for our most traveled and congested corridor existing in the county. It provides opportunities to spur development and connections to more corridors in the region. And development, I think, is key for North Milwaukee, as well as the residents in the area in terms of generation of jobs. Next slide, please. So why bus rapid transit? Why BRT? We already talked about it. It's a multimodal transportation system that connects people to jobs. It's cost effective for a new service. But what I like about it is it has the potential to connect a whole bunch of different economic development, residential, and various groups. So 9 colleges and universities along the route, $120,000 in jobs, 47,000 residents will be linked in some way to our transportation system, 7 medical facilities, and countless attractions throughout the Milwaukee County area. Those are all real big pluses to encourage people to participate in the system. In addition, the East-West BRT is projected to average over 9,500 daily riders by 2035. That's good. If you have a good, strong service that has the ability to sustain itself, in addition to being able to rely on some funding either from the county or from the state, that's a good starting point for us. Next slide. So the BRT, the populations it serves, within a half mile of the East-West corridor, which is the route in which BRT will be on, it's about 69,000 in population. 21% of those who don't have a car are able to utilize this service. 37% of the minority population along this corridor, as well as 23% of the population that is below the poverty level, has access to this route. That's important because in the past, a lot of times the state and the county were not just accused, but it was apparent that we were not meeting the needs of those who most needed the services of the transit system. In Milwaukee County, as you can see, 14% of the population don't have access to cars. 46% of the population is minority in Milwaukee County. So this is a nice link to the rest of our transportation system and provides options for our community. Next slide. So station design. This is really nice. What I like about this service and on BRT is it looks sort of like commuter rail or train service in comparison to bus service. And there's nothing wrong with the way our bus service has its stops, but this is a nice addition and change. So it has a transparent facade so people can see in and out. Lighting is capable to get in, and that's really nice in the wintertime after 5 o'clock when it's really dark out. You want as much light as you can get. It's ADA compliant. Anyone in a wheelchair who has any kind of handicap disability will be able to access this facility. It has weather protected shelters and it's off-board fare collection. You'll have a box that you can actually collect your fare. We're also, I think Dave also spoke, we're also partnering on a potential app that will allow us to provide similar to like Uber or Lyft, where you could pay on your phone and so forth. Ongoing coordination with owners along the route adjacent to the stations to ensure that they're kept clean, snow removal is kept clear around there, and that safety is of concern. Next slide. The unique thing about the BRT is battery electric bus service. 11 battery electric buses will serve this route. What that means for us is in the African-American community and in low-income communities around these stations who utilize these buses, you're not getting the pollution. We're really addressing that green movement that is so important these days. We have a RFP that was released on July 30th. We're waiting to get the selection of those proposals through the end of this month. And we anticipate vehicle delivery by 2022 to use on the route. Next slide. So project costs and expenses, $55 million. We've received-
Deborah Bauer Watling. Join the meeting.
We received $55 million in a capital grant from the Small Starts program. And that's pretty significant and important. We fought and applied for that funding, and we just received notification this summer that we were going to receive the grant. About 80% of that is federal money. 21% is Milwaukee County dollars and a match. So we have about 11 million in funding, and then in-kind match with infrastructure and other bonding that we'll be bringing to the table from the county. Next slide. So in terms of the project phase, we started this project in 2016 with a study. And I want to point out that this county MCDOT uses sewer pack a lot to assist us in the development and analysis of all kinds of transportation needs. We are extremely lucky to have access to sewer pack to assist us in developing analyses, look at all of the facts and data that come in from across the nation. And so they helped us start the study in 2016. We are right now in the process of completing final design. We'll continue with stakeholder engagement. We just completed the FTA risk assessment, a really big hurdle to get over in order for this project to get started. And we anticipate by the end of the year that we should have the actual announcement of the Small Starts grant, as well as approval from the county board. We begin construction next year, and in 2022, we'll be delivering on the project. Next slide. Another item that we have is MCTS next. So MCTS is a pretty traditional transportation transit system. And what we're doing with MCTS Next is reimagining the entire system. One, to make it more efficient, provide faster service, provide more connections between the routes. So connections for the purple line, the blue line, the green line, all those routes that really are heavily used by the public, and increase accessibility. Those are all important connections that ultimately will link to our newest service, which is BRT, in about 2 years. Next slide. So in terms of how we're going to make this more user-friendly for the users of Milwaukee County, we have 16 frequency routes, 17 local routes, and 3 daytime routes. Many more frequency routes means that your routes are converted to 15-minute high frequency services, which is great because right now they're they range between 30, 45 minutes, and in some cases an hour. So being able to catch your bus in 15 minutes and get to the location that you're looking for between stops in 15 minutes, that's a big plus. Two of the routes that are major changes, Route 35, the major enhancement to 35 is that it will become a high frequency routes. Buses will arrive every 15 minutes instead of 22 minutes. Today, the North End will continue to serve the Aurora Clinic on Good Hope Road, and the Southern End will be extended past the endpoint of Howard Avenue and provide new service on Loomis Road to Layton Avenue. So those kinds of changes really present opportunities for the residents to get to where they need to go and have more access to grocery stores, hospitals, and businesses. Next slide. So the third item that we have is a program or a study that we've started called the North-South Transit Enhancement Study. And it's a link, it's a sort of indirect link that we've identified for the East-West corridor. As many of you know, the East-West corridor from downtown near the stadium all the way out to Waukesha, that road project is going to be reconstructed sometime in the near future. And normally what the state of Wisconsin says is, you know, we'll give you some mitigation dollars to help you with transit so people don't have to be on the road in the middle of construction. Well, that's all good and well, but it's short term, it's not long term, it's not sustainable. I wanted something a lot more sustainable. And so we're in the middle of what we're doing. This North-South Transit Enhancement Study is looking at what we might do for another route for BRT. But in the meantime, we could use this as a mitigation effort for transit. Looking from 27th Street, we could use the existing Purple Line route, which is a really highly utilized route. It has high density residential development along it, employment along the corridor, and has easy connections for other high frequency transit routes that we're developing. Next slide. So the study looks at the existing route and talks about making it even more along the lines of like a freeway flyer. Now, we're not taking away the Purple Line. That's an important route, we'll keep it. But we'll also add to it this enhanced route, which allows people to get downtown faster, get to connections to like the bus rapid transit or the Gold Line out to the medical center as quickly as possible. So it has connections to the near west side, to Menominee Valley, and to the downtown area. Next, I'll hurry up here. So for this, what's most important to the Urban League is the total population. There's about 118,000 people within a half mile of these existing stops on the Purple Line. Think about that, 118,000 people. And there's 49,000 jobs along this route. Next slide. Families in poverty, 28% of families live within a half mile of existing stops on this route. 63% of those families are in poverty. Now, if we're going to try to get the most bang for our buck for the people who most need the service, this is the way to do it. Utilize an existing route that is already pretty successful, enhance it so that they might be able to get even more benefit, and encourage businesses to participate with us. Next slide. Minority population, 75% of people within 5 miles of the existing stop are non-white or Hispanic. So Black and Hispanic are the majority along this route. So we're really meeting the needs of those who need it most. Next slide. Also, those without a car, 23% of households are within a half mile. Nearly 1 in 5 households without a car in Milwaukee County are within a half mile of the purple line. So this is a major route that makes connections for everyone who doesn't have access to transportation outside of transit. Next slide. So that's something that we're studying. It's something that I'm trying to sell to the state for support for that project, but it has good bones, and I think that we will be able to make it. This last slide that I have here is on a route that we have regarding Route 81, Amazon Oak Creek. I think many of you know Oak Creek has a new Amazon facility, and we just started on October 11th service out to that 7 days a week between the intersections of North 35th Street and West Fond du Lac Avenue, and then South 13th Street and Ryan Road in Oak Creek. The stops on portions of West Fond du Lac Avenue, North 17th Street, West Walnut Street, North and South 6th Street. Those are the stops for connections. So anyone who's working out there can catch during at those locations. Route 81 also connects with 16 existing MCTS bus routes. So there's not an issue of only you have to somehow figure out a way to get to where bus 81 stops. Routes 12, 14, 19, 21, 22, 30, 31, 33, 35, 56, 57, 60, and 80. Gold line, blue line, purple line, all of them transfer to 81 and can get to this location. So just to wrap it all up, we've got a lot of things in the hoppers. We're trying to partner with the state to encourage their participation in these things, but we're also trying to partner with businesses and let residents know that we've got a lot of things that are on the hopper moving forward for transit in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. There's a lot that you're doing, and what you are doing can really make a difference, but I can see right now will definitely require a lot of collaboration between the state and the city, but also collaboration between counties, because I also keep going back in my mind, thinking about what Dave said with 50% of those jobs now being in the surrounding counties. So, you know, how are we making sure people are getting there? And then you mentioned some of the major routes, especially 27th Street. You know, that's huge. So to me, that is really one of the priorities, along with the 81, with the Amazon jobs, et cetera, that we need to figure out, you know, how do we enhance? As the other thing I think about, everyone, is, you know, with winter coming, people standing out on these corners. Wouldn't that be a great initiative of some sort if we could begin to create some kind of shelters at as many of our bus stops as we can? Most of us that are probably on this line are drivers. But then many of us remember when we're growing up and taking the bus, it could be pretty cold out there. So, you know, just being sensitive about who's out there and what is it that we can do as a community. And these are just things that came to my mind again, as all of you were talking with Donna. A lot of good work there. Congratulations on that grant as well. And then just the commitment by the county on the inclusivity, influence, and integrity, which, you know, will hopefully shape the mindsets there too. Chandra, before I go to, you know, our audience with any other questions, any thoughts? You know, you're my board member, and again, I'm so glad you're with us today and served as our opening speaker. You're in the business sector. You work for Associated Bank as a VP there. You know, you work with small businesses. You're watching how the bank is supporting different initiatives. What do you think about today's discussion, and what should, say, business and companies like yourselves be thinking about?
Yeah, I thought the discussion was great. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, yes. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. I thought the discussion was great, and it's great to hear about the different initiatives that are being worked on, especially to improve transportation. We know that transportation is key to getting individuals to jobs and to be reliable in those jobs. So definitely excited about that. I would say organizations, if they are able to, spread the word, contribute, if there is an opportunity to contribute to these funds or these funds, I think that would be great. It's definitely something that at Associated Bank that we are looking into. We definitely have been doing a lot in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and we want to ensure that not only are our employees able to get to work, but also that we can assist some of our partners in providing transportation to those that need it as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we do have a couple of questions, and I see one. I'm not sure more. Is that the one that you're reflective?
Yes, the one, is there a slider data regarding the number of jobs on that line 2? And Donna, I believe this is for you regarding Route 81. Is there a slide or data regarding the number of jobs on that line, specifically those that pay well?
In terms of the information for Route 81 out to Amazon, I just have the information for this effort in terms of Amazon, but I can get that information and share it with the Urban League so they can share it with everyone. There are a number of jobs out there, but I don't have the exact number of the number of jobs that are there.
Okay, thank you. And then Dr. Hall, we have one for you. Sharon thanks you for the analysis and wonders if there's anything in the works regarding connecting with the counties for transit to jobs in those areas or counties.
Yes, so Sharon, I'm so glad you're part of our call today. And thanks for the question, Sora. So we actually are in conversation around how we can help with access to those jobs in other counties. I mean, we have a specific small pilot that we're working on at the Urban League, but we're also in those conversations through that Regional Leadership Council via Dave that you heard earlier. So the conversations are starting because it is so critical, as we keep trying to work through just the public transit access. So that's where we are there, if that answers. So I think those were the only two questions
Yes.
that we had. More, is that right?
Correct, yes.
So, but I would say though, panel, you've heard each other, and this is just this ongoing conversation about the gap. But there's been, I think, some resolve to some of these issues, especially in terms of projects. But, and I see a question, but there's something about, has there been a conversation with suburban employees regarding a commitment to hiring people from the city? And I will say to Bianca, there has been. I mean, we're constantly in conversation, on different counties and some individual conversations, but there's an interest. Again, what ends up hurting us is this transportation issue. So that's what we're up against. It's people that seem to want us in these jobs, but then there also has to be the willingness from companies to work with us around transportation issues. And that again it's a collaborative effort to make sure this happens. And we keep working at it. And I know you've been out there, Paula's part of this call. She's been out there. In fact, I know she did a study about the kinds of commitments from employers. for employees from the city and just diversity. So I think we all have to keep working together to put the pressure on. And someone just sent a question: what kind of discussions pressure needs to be placed on elected officials in the surrounding counties to fund cross-county transit? I think that is definitely a good question. And Jeff, I mentioned that early on because that stood out to me, is at the end of the day, everything is about funding. I mean, we can't do things without money. And so I would just say we continue to collaborate as much as possible. We can use this forum as a way to extend those conversations, because funding is going to be the key to making things happen. So I know we're nearing the end, and I really want to be respectful of everyone's time. But if I could get some final comments also from our panelists on any of the things that were discussed, or what just sticks out in your mind that we have to make sure that we stay conscious and intentional about in terms of closing the gaps on the transportation issues, especially. I won't speak so much about housing because I think this is really more about transportation today, although housing connects, but in terms of transportation. So I'll begin with you, Donna. You were the last one that spoke, so I'll have you be the first one to speak this time. Then I'll go to Dave and then to Nikki.
So I would say the most important thing is dedicated funding for transit, for transportation in general. There isn't a dedicated funding source. It would be nice if we had the ability to work through our legislature for a regional transportation authority that allowed us to take just a small, we're only talking about a half a cent to fully fund what our transit needs are in this region, and contribute towards what our needs are to improve local roads. Just the ability to patch the local road system is a challenge every single spring. I patch them up and a truck and cars come through and they tear apart. A dedicated funding source is important, and it doesn't have to be a battle between the right and the left. This is something for the entire community. Everyone benefits from it.
Thank you. Dave?
I completely agree. As I was seeing the chat come in, I just had so many thoughts swirling. I think as we really work to engage regional leaders and specifically suburban leadership, there's a number of issues there. And I said this morning at a United Way call, somebody asked, well, how can we help? And we have to amplify voices that are counteracting the negative voices, and I will call it out, racist voices in these urban communities. And I'm not, and that's real. I've been in the rooms in these community meetings where, people will say things that make you, want to jump out of your skin. But the thing is, these are highly localized political conversations. And, your local alderman, your local mayor, your county exec, your county supervisors, they will hear the negativity. They will hear, well, we don't want that bus route around here. So, we need to empower and elevate voices from business communities around the region that understand that this is economic development, that bus riders are your customers, they are your employees, they are your community members, they are your friends, they are your parents. It's a vital service that allows people to connect to opportunity and builds workforce and builds economic development. And there are, I would say, allies throughout the region that understand that, but the challenge is that not enough speak up because they're not quite as engaged as more of the negative voices who do seem to be, unfortunately, a little more engaged. And, a lot of times, like in local government, 4 or 5 emails 4 or 5 people showing up to a meeting and switch, the whole tone of the debate. So that's one thing. And I remain ever hopeful, but yet cautiously hopeful that we can, change the tone of some of the debate. I think also we need to, and this is where I give a huge tip of the hat to Milwaukee County and Donna, for things like the Amazon route. So you look at the Amazon route and you think, well, this is a bus route between Milwaukee and a huge job center in the suburbs, but it's actually a very innovative route because if you notice, it serves the neighborhoods, but it also hops on the freeway. So that whole dilemma that we talked about, where it's like it's going to take you an hour and a half to get to a good paying job, Milwaukee County figured out a way to serve a large number of people, but also make it like a hybrid freeway flyer so that you're not on that bus for 90 minutes, an hour and 90 minutes to access that job. So we have to innovate. And I think that can also change the parameters of the conversation because, we've seen bus routes, suburban bus routes get cut, and oftentimes they were serving very, very low numbers of people. There was the jobs line that went out to Menominee Falls, Route 57, that had about 4 people per hour using it. So now one could argue that as that route would be there for a decade or several years or more, that more people would use it. But the challenge is that very bus route, the 57, used to go a block from my house. If I was to take it out to Menominee Falls, it would require a long, long ride and a long, long walk to get to a destination. So I think, we need to look at what other regions around the United States are doing. In Columbus, Ohio, you can get on a bus in the city of Columbus, rapid bus route to Dublin, Ohio, which is very similar to Brookfield. And then when you get off that bus in Dublin, there's a circulator. It's called Share Columbus. It's essentially a shuttle style van, but that is more on demand, like an Uber or a Lyft will come pick you up at the bus stop and then take you to wherever you're going at, that job. And it's not a fixed route service, so that if there's nobody there to pick up or drop off, it doesn't even go there. So it's a lot faster. And, there's a lot of promise in those services that, can serve people more effectively. And then the ridership then is there and it shows, hey, people are using this and they see value in it. And that's a different conversation than we've had previously. So there's a lot to unpack. It's certainly not easy. We have a lot to kind of work through. But I remain optimistic, and I wouldn't be an optimist. I wouldn't be in this work if I wasn't an optimist. To keep focused on ultimately what we're trying to do here, which is connect people to opportunities with systems and services that any one of us here would choose to use. And if we strive for, and that's why I'm really appreciative of the work with Milwaukee County with the BRT and the North-South. Even if you have a car, would you choose to use it? Is it that good of a service? And that's what Milwaukee County is going for here. And I'm super optimistic we can get there in Milwaukee County. The challenge is how do we get that regionally and show the value to our suburban counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dave. And you mentioned the elephant in the room, and you and I have been in many conversations when that whole issue of racism is skipped over because people don't want to talk about it, and it is real. And I've been in those rooms too. And the fact remains, and which is why I'm saying this has to be a collaborative effort. People have to see that there's a win-win. We are interdependent. And as you said, valuing individuals who are trying to get to jobs because they are spending money and they are customers and they are employees and they are people in this community that should be valued and honored for their people are trying to work. So, race continues to be at the center of so much. And, that's something that in these discussions, we will have to continue to cut through. I think in the chat box, Paula mentioned one of the mayors, let me just see, because in fact, when I came back to Milwaukee, I was in the room with Paula around these very discussions about transportation, and I came back here in 2012, so it's been continued. And she talked about one of the mayors from Oak Creek who really stood up, and how we do need to have more. What else was said in here? How can we put pressure on leaders in Madison? I think it's the continued conversation we're having now, and using entities like the Regional Leadership Council, partnering with the Urban League and others to have that collaborative voice to say, here's what we need, and having the examples of what each of you have brought to the table. You, Dave, you, Donna, and then what you've talked about, Nikki. Dorinthia said it would be great if companies would even set up private group transportation from areas in the city to their locations. They have the jobs and people are in the city. Better way to get them connected. We're actually in a partnership with Chewy, Stella and Chewy's right now. And Dave, you were part of those initial conversations where they have a lot of jobs that they're hiring for. So we are actually looking at how we will develop some personal types of transportation so people can get there, or supportive transportation so people can access those jobs. So it's almost like an Amazon on a smaller level with a particular company that we are working with. So Nikki, your words as our final panelist.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hall. I'm going to echo what Dave and Donna both were saying. We do need that dedicated funding source, but we also don't have a regional transit authority. So an organization that actually helps all 7 counties work together to work on how transit would be done between those 7 counties. We don't have that system here. And some other areas of the country, they do. We're just not an area that has authorized to do that. So I think that would be the biggest thing. SEWRPAC does in some ways kind of fit that bill, but it doesn't have, it's an advisory organization. So it doesn't have the authority to make anything happen. We need an organization, a regional organization that can actually make these things happen.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So we are right up against the hour. Thank you, Nikki, for those closing remarks. And thank you, panelists, again, for sharing information, for your commitment. This is not over, so this is just continued work that we must do. And we are, as an Urban League, we want to partner with all of you on these issues and see how we can make some movement. So Nikki Payne, Dave Steele, Donna Brown Martin, I bow to you. I thank you for your work. Once again, I'd like to thank BMO Harris Bank for sponsoring the roundtable, for Chandra Rogers opening us up today. And just as a reminder, our next roundtable will be in 2021, January 27th. Between now and then, I would say have a happy Thanksgiving, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year to all that are listening to us and to our panelists. And to also know that on Saturday, November 21st, we will be having our Black and White Ball, which normally takes place in June. But this year, because of COVID-19, we had to switch it to a virtual ball. So please join us on that. I think it's going to be a very fun evening, even though it's virtual. So everyone have a great day. For those of you that joined us today, thank you so much for being a part of us. Have a good rest of the day. This is your Milwaukee Urban League Community Roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. It was wonderful as usual.
Oh, thank you, Millie. I haven't heard that voice for a while. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. I am good. Well, good to hear your voice. Thank you so